All right, for this part of the recording, I have redone, so those of you who are watching from home, I have redone Unit 6 done 2015. You might want to download a new version depending on when you do it. You may already get today's recording. And also download a new version of the import employees SQL file. The reason these have changed is Paul discovered an error at the end of last time's recording. He discovered that if you don't capitalize ID right, the case sensitivity can come back to haunt you. And so I looked inside of import employees. It had some capital D's. It also, you might remember, had the trips table that is linked using employee ID instead of emp ID, and I changed that so they're all emp ID now. And so that database should be a little more convenient for us. I also took all the minus ones out that represented true and put in ones to represent true. So that data is a little more accurate. And then in Unit 6, I went through every single file and looked for capital IDs except in messages and stuff and took all those out. And so everything is now uppercase I, lowercase d, and as long as we follow that convention, we should be okay. What Paul discovered is if he put in a capital D where there was a little d or vice versa, sometimes it mattered, sometimes it didn't. And trying to keep track of when and why is just a pain. My advice, as it's been for quite a while, is name your fields using camel case and then stick with that throughout your code.
Walker, how do you kill a query?
How do you kill a query?
Or kill the script? Because I got an index is out of range error and it's
Uh-oh.
frozen.
I thought I imported mine. I didn't have any trouble.
I'm just gonna try dropping it because I can't.
You might have to kill the workbench. I'm not sure. I thought I imported mine without any errors. Let's pause it. Okay, what I didn't do before class was test this, and now that I've tested it, looks like there's an emp ID and a plant ID that got left over in employees, so we'll go clean those out in a second. What we were having trouble with before was the date not coming in, and the reason for that one is because I forgot to transfer it in front of the field. I missed a step, and that's been modified. The employee ID seems to be coming in okay, and I did rename it, so that should be all right. Though it is complaining about something. Might be because of those things up there. So I'm going to switch back now to my brackets file. Where'd my brackets file go? Gone. And I'm going to go to the employees model, and supposedly on 47 and 67. I missed one. Yep, there's one. And 67.
There's also one on yet, else it's 49 and 51.
Thank you.
So it's also one on line 6.
Line what?
Line 6.
That one's commented out. This one you mean?
I'm going to start throwing it out of mine.
Oh, that's the sample array, and we're just replacing it with stuff out of the database, so your sample array is getting wiped out. But you should be able to comment that line out, because that's the one that created my test data when I first launched the program.
Yeah, I'm missing stuff here.
If yours isn't commented out, then maybe you didn't download it.
What I just did. Or I opened one.
I'm in Unit 6 done 2015, so pretty sure that's what I uploaded. So let's save that, go back to here, refresh. Save was authorized. I don't have any good way to get back to the list yet.
Yeah, no.
And I did get a plant that changes. That's what I was looking for. That's an interesting place for the $sign. Who did that? $sign in front of the check mark. I think we'll fix that while we're here. Okay, so that would be the employee details view. and come down to wherever the check mark is. There's my $sign, and cut it from there and put it in front of the salary field. That's better. It's a weird font though. Must be because I'm on the outside. This is always a challenge, it seems, with Chrome, is to get the font on the outside to be the same as the font on the inside, and a lot of it's just got to do with styling of the input fields. Of course, all that fancy dancy bootstrap stuff that you guys are doing eliminates all that problem, right? So I think we're in decent shape here. None of these are working just yet. So what we did last time was found a way, wrote some SQL, and some SQL, but we also connected. All right, so we created a connection file. This is my pretty much standard connection file. The only thing I swap out are the addresses, the table names, database names. But everything else is pretty much the same. This error message, you can put other stuff in there. It says you're having trouble with the connection. Maybe while you're testing, you want to put something else in there, but the only reason you'll see this is if there's some reason you can't connect to that database. You forgot to start MySQL. You've got the wrong version of wrong stick in, you've got whatever, the database is not there. You misspelled the database name. If you see the error that says it's down temporarily, that's just my final version, because once my program is stable, I don't expect this error to ever show up. And when it does, it's because my database is down. But usually when my database is down, the whole website's down. So I don't see this very often. All right, so we started with that and we brought that in using the header. If I remember right now, that went into the index file. So in the index file, we brought in the connection. Every single case uses it. I don't think I have an example right now where there's a case inside of my cases that doesn't somehow use that connection. So that's why I put it in here, because every case needs it. Then we split up the cases. Let's go to the employee cases as a quick review, put a bunch in here, and we wrote the code to get the employee list. Also changed that to, at least for right now, the default event or the default action is employee list. So inside get employee list, I know I'm jumping around, but now I'm in the model. Inside get the employee list is our first SQL command. When we did our connection, we defined a variable called DB. DB points to our database. In order to access that from inside of a function, I have to reference it as a global variable. I have to designate it as a global variable so that I can access it. Then I define a variable called myQuery, and I do this in just about every one of my queries. Here's another one. And then after that, include a command that you want to execute in the database. That command can be a select command, it could be an update command, it could be any of the commands you learned in RDD, and you'll get some features back. When we start doing updates and inserts and deletes, the query that we execute will return the number of rows that was affected, just like the workbench does. And we could use that if we want to. I normally ignore it. Because if the delete fails, I'm going to get some other kind of error, and I'm going to see that from an SQL error, and I don't expect them to fail. In this case, we're simply grabbing what we need, the ID and the concatenated name. I put an as on there, I did, from the employees ordered by that name. Then we have to execute a database prepare method. This method returns they in the description and the documentation call it a statement. Basically, it's an SQL statement, but it's much more than that. It's a statement class that gets returned automatically. We send it the query. It sends us a statement. This gets this query ready for executing, but does not execute. At that point, we executed the query. And what's bizarre here is when you execute the query, the result set is automatically stored back inside that statement object, whatever that is. And at that point, we can say, hey, you, Mr. Statement, fetch me all of the records that you have, giving me just an associative array. I think I did show you, or at least I talked about it, the fetch all command, if you don't put that flag in there, will return one array that has two components to it, a numeric index and an associative index. We will rarely be using numeric index, so this says don't give it to me, just give me the associative array, field name, field value, field name, field value. Once we're done executing the statement, or getting the results out of the statement, then we can close. And notice you close the statement, you don't close the database. Once you're done manipulating the data, I've taken all of the data out of statement, put it into a variable called results. At that point, you can close your cursor, and normally we return the results. Jumping back to where we just came from, those results, let's try this. Those results then got stored, because here I'm in the result. This is called get employee details, or list, excuse me. Here's get employee list, and I return results. Out here, I rename it emps. So I take whatever this function returns to me, I renamed it emps. If you prefer results all over the place, had some students last year do that, I'm okay with that. This array is then available to my view. So from the index, we found out that the default action is employee list. So we're doing this action. We get the employee list by executing this nice thing down here, talking to the database. That employee list then results in an array of fields. In this case, it's an array of arrays of fields, all of my employees. And I want to send that to the view. So now down here, I'm switching to the employee list view. In this view, we simply used a for each loop to walk through the list of employees. This employees variable is available. Walk through each one of the employees in the list, call it a single employee, create a paragraph, and inside the paragraph, I have a link. Inside that link, I display the employee's name. So this is the one element of the array. Grab its name, echo that, and then wrapped around it is an A tag that requests an action of employee details and includes the employee ID. This is not visible on the form. This is what the link goes to. So every employee, I've got their ID because that's what my query gave me that I've blown away here. Every query sends me, for each employee, it sends me their ID number and their name. I take the ID number, bury it inside of the link, and display the name. And then do that over and over and over again. This demonstrates a minimal PHP method where the for each loop's got a colon on it. Inside, there's HTML that has some PHP embedded inside. Some of you were looking at that a little cross-eyed last week going, why don't we just do that all in one big echo statement? Okay.
Sometimes you have to. I did a for each with an if after it.
Oh, the two of them got confused?
Yeah, didn't like that at all.
Okay, good to know. So if there's an if after the for each, Reen at least is proposing, that didn't work very well. Did you put it inside? Well, I guess this colon, maybe the curly brackets, there's probably ways to do it, but you found out that all you're really doing is putting an echo around this, right?
Yeah.
Echo around that, and echo around this whole thing, but now we've got quotes inside of an href that's got apostrophes inside of here, and you got to really be careful with all your quotes and apostrophes. So the end result of this is that list that we had. Looks like this. And that's not bad. Kind of double spaced, that's all right. If you don't want it double spaced, then don't use paragraphs. Use an unordered list. Make each one of those a list item with no bullets in front. Put it in a table. All kinds of things you can do. But whenever I touch any one of these things, now at the bottom I can see the link that was created by my HTML, that says take me back to the page, the index page, sending the action of employee details with this number. Okay, so then we click on one of these, then what happens? We click the link, it takes us back to the index page. The index page says, what's the action? The action starts with employee, so here we are with employee details. In employee details, we first clear our errors array in case there is one. That may go away to experiment a little bit. But then we need two pieces of information. In order to display this page, I need my list of plants. And I also need all the rest of the details, including which plant was selected. So the first thing we do is get a list of plants. Take a quick look at that one. That's in the plants model. You get used to this, bouncing around. Where is it? It's in the model, it's in the GUI. It's not too bad. It's in the cases. Here's my plant list. Again, a query. Generates plant IDs and plant names from the plants, sorts them, and spits back an array of plant IDs and names. So that got stored in a variable called plants. Then we call the get employee details. Get employee details is our first example of a parameterized query. To avoid SQL injection, we select everything from the employees table where the employee ID equals some unknown parameterized value. The colon on that employee ID says, I'm going to fill this in a minute. I'm going to tell you what it is. This employee ID is the name of the field in the database. So this is a placeholder. We prepare the query like we did before, but then we transfer the ID which got sent in. Notice up here I sent the employee ID from the request array. I stripped it out of the request array here, sent it into there. This ID then gets transferred to :emp ID, which is the parameter. So this ID has now been plugged into that query without any way of doing SQL injection, so it should be secure. At that point, we execute again, but this time we do a little bit, we don't do a fetch all, excuse me. Where'd it go? We don't do a fetch all, we do a fetch. There's only one record coming out of this query. The details for employee number 1010101, whichever one I selected. The details of that employee is coming out, so it's a one element array of key value pairs.
Does it hurt to do fetch all?
I think if you do a fetch all, you get an extra index on it because you get element 0 of the array versus this technique where you just get an array of key value pairs, is my guess. But you know there's one there. It would probably be wise to let the maintenance programmer know you expect one record to come out of this and use a fetch. Again, we close the cursor, we send back the results, but this time the results is a single associative array of key value pairs that gets put into details. And then both the plants and the details and the empty errors array, all of those are sent to the employee detail form, and the employee detail form then starts putting all that to work. Inside the employee detail form, we have the next action that we expect to do, and that's employee update. When I leave this form, I'm going to send an action of employee update. This might be flexible. We might be doing employee insert or employee new. We'll figure that out as we go. And I also have a variable that says JavaScript is validated. This should be set to true. Initially, its value is set to false, but our JavaScript that we hit on load or on form load should set this to true so that the PHP, the server side, knows that the JavaScript validated stuff and we don't have to worry about it. This is also a technique we'll probably continue to use even with our Ajax technique, where if I'm on the form and I'm checking for duplicates, the only thing right now that we have, if we use HTML5 appropriately, the only thing that we have the server doing is checking for duplicate records. And if I can do that via Ajax, then I don't even need the server to do that. But Ajax, again, is JavaScript. If JavaScript is off, that's not getting done. We need to communicate that to the server to say, you need to check all of the consistency check stuff, any multi-field things. We can't do those if JavaScript is off. We can use HTML5 to do most of our validation, but not all of it. All right, so that's what that's for. Then we come in here, and for every field, I have a label, I have an input type, and notice at the end here, it checks to see, is there an employee ID in the details array? Field value is a simple little function, I showed it to you last time, that checks to see if this exists. If it does, it sends you its value. If it doesn't, it sends back a default value. I think I wrote a new one. Did I show you the new one?
Mhm.
Okay, where that has, we can specify a default value here if you wish, like 0.
It made it really nice when I was trying to figure out what was going wrong when reading the data back from the database. So I just put like error in there or something, so I knew it was not something was wrong.
All right, so for the default, instead of an empty string, which is the default return here, you put in the word error as a third parameter and it just sent that back to you.
I just put that as the default, yeah.
All the time? Oh, you put it in, okay, so you do it all the time.
Well, until, it goes
Get it sorted out.
live, yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay, because sometimes, well, what you haven't hit yet, maybe you have, is what if it's a new record? Then it should be blank.
Then it should be blank,
Unless there's a default value.
then I had to go wipe it out.
An active camper is the default value for a new record, I would think.
Maybe, yes. Okay, so that's what this does. This field value function just checks to see if this exists. If not, it gives you a default value. And so now my value clause has the employee ID from the details array as its value, and that's what makes it show here. Here we're checking the errors array using an error style function that I also wrote last year, and this one we may get rid of because I think a lot of these error styles are going to be handled by HTML5. But this, if there's an error from the server, we can use this to find out, did the error include the employee ID field? If it does, then make this image show up. So that's what that does. I've kind of left them in there because I'm a little nervous about which ones. I think the only ones we need to leave like this are the ones that are related to logical keys that could be duplicated. How do we mark that? Or maybe if we have some consistency checks like the city miles and the highway miles can't both be blank, won't be able to do that with JavaScript. Won't be able to do that with JavaScript off. Might have to mark those somehow. Here's a different way of doing it. Just didn't update it. I can check to see if the details array is set. If it is, then give me the first name, otherwise give me the empty string. That's exactly what the field value function does, exactly that. So here I could simplify this and say, give me the field value of the details array first name field. Done. So there's a shortcut for that. And instead of putting it up here, since I'm not doing anything with it, what I've been doing lately, and I'm going to do this once and leave the rest of them alone and maybe fix them all for you offline. Copy that. And down here, oh, I put it in there. It's already there. So this statement is now useless, right? Unless I'm using that first name for something, which I'm not. It's already plugged down here as field value, and that's the appropriate thing to do. Probably the same thing for last name. Looks like I got some excess code floating around there. Yep. Gender seems to be doing, oh, there we already have the field name gender, but this one I do it in advance because genders are handled with radio buttons. So there's not some single input field that I can use. So here I grab the gender out of the array and put it into this variable. And then I use that gender to figure out which one of these to turn on. If the gender is F, then add the checked clause to the F radio, female radio button, otherwise add it to the male radio button. And again, there's an error icon there just in case. But this gives you an idea how to select radio buttons. Grab the value out of the array and then figure out which one of the radio buttons is on. Unfortunately, you have to add this line of PHP to the end of every one of your options, because you don't know which one it's going to be, so you add it to every one, but only one of these will ever be checked at a time. So there's radio buttons. We scroll down a little bit more. This is a combo box. So here I'm grabbing the field value of the plant ID. Remember, in the employees table, we don't have the plant name, we have the plant ID. So I remember that plant ID, and then I start a combo box. Got some logic in here for when we're doing new ones. I add an extra value to my combo box. And my validation can check to see if the value is still missing. If it is, I can say this is required. You have to tell me where these people work. Or on the saver side, I can say if it says missing, then give me a null ID number. So here's an option that's empty at the top. Notice there's nothing in the option itself, so this has the combo box showing up blank. The only way to get a blank option in a combo box is to put one in there. So that's what I've done with a value of missing. So, and you could use the empty string for that matter to designate that they haven't picked anything. Here's a for each loop then. I walk through each one of the plants, treat it as a P for each one of the plants, take its ID number and make it the value of that combo box item, take its name and put it inside the combo box. I'm sorry, that's down here, right there. And then if the plant ID that's coming in is the same as the plant ID I'm working on right now, then that's the one that's selected, turn on the selected flag. This gets a little more complicated if you're doing multi-select, but you start walking through and say if it's in the array someplace, then grab it. Phone number, another interesting one. In the database, it's unformatted, but on my screen, I want to show it formatted. So if it's empty, then I use the empty string. Otherwise, if there is not an error in my phone number, if there is an error in my phone number, I'm not going to try to format it. It's just going to make it worse. So if there's not an error, then use my format phone function, which is in my PHP utilities, that formats this phone. I only have one phone format right now that's designated. So there's, at least I think so. Where's my utilities? Format the phone with an optional field of a dash. So if you don't do anything different, this formats the phone number. This is your delimiter. If you send in a parentheses, you get this kind of a phone number. If you send in a G, you get nothing, and otherwise you get phone numbers with dashes in them. So if you want something else, you can put a dot in here and say I want dots between my fields and the phone numbers. You can put slashes in there if that's what you want. This format phone does give you some flexibility. If you don't specify anything, you just get dashes in between. So that's what we're getting here. So it's coming out of the database unformatted, but I want to display it formatted. If there's an error in it, then I just display whatever the original data was. That phone number then gets plugged into the value field so we can see it on the form. And again, if we look at the phone number here, it's got dashes in it, just as we would expect. Anything else good? Here's a date, and in this case I'm using just a standard date field because I'm in Chrome. I get all the fancy Chrome stuff that I can do with dates, but in the other browsers you might not get that. Same thing here. I take the value of the date and plug it in. This, Reen, you take it, you figured out how to put the default into our date picker. So if you're using my fancy dancy date picker with its PHP stuff and JavaScript that it does, Reen found the command to set its default value. Here's a salary text box. I'm not going to do much with that. In the past, I used to format it, but because it's currency, I've now put the currency symbol in front. Using your Bootstrap stuff, you can put an addendum at the beginning to show that you want that done. Can't put commas in our number fields anymore. So this one used to be formatted like the phone, but it doesn't work that way anymore. So the phone number is handy for phone numbers, 5 9-digit zip codes. You want a dash in between. Social security numbers, have you ever seen one of those? Anything else? Used to be for numbers, but it's not anymore. Here's the way to do a checkbox. Are they a union member? Once again, grab the default value if there is one. If it's undefined, give me false in this case. So there's that third parameter. The checkbox itself has nothing in front of it. Here's my checkbox. If the union member is true, remember that's a Boolean value. If it's true, then add the word checked, otherwise add nothing. And then there's the label for the checkbox, and so there's what that looks like. Bunch of buttons that we haven't messed with yet. Okay, whew. That's a lot for just pulling it off the list, put it into the form. Yeah, we're not done yet because we haven't dealt with the new stuff yet. But after you've done this a couple of times, you start getting the picture of how this is working and where the data comes from. And I think the key part for you to remember is the cases file. In the cases file, you collect all your data. Get it out of the database. Once you've collected it all, and as Reen said, sometimes he's got forms with 5, 6, 7 tables that need to come in. Well, collect them one at a time and generate your lists. Make sure they work. Collect the data, then display the view. That's pretty common. We add a little more complexity when we start saving because we need to figure out which button was it, and those kinds of things. So let's start there today. And we already have, let's see, when we click this button, when we click these buttons down here, we submit the form. And we submit the form, we automatically generate the employee update action, which should take us here. We validate it, and right now there shouldn't be much going on there because my JavaScript validation could almost bypass that. If the count of errors is 0, then we say saved authorized. Otherwise, notice we go back and show them the plant list, the request array, what's in there?
Everything that was on the form.
Everything that was on the form, including the bad data. And if there's errors, there'll be something in the errors array. So if there's something in the errors array, then we send back the plant list to continue to load the combo box. We send the request array, which has got the bad data, all of it back to the employee details. Notice once again, when I go to the details, I have errors, I have plants, and I have details. Now that's a little further down the road. In here now, I'm going to add some code that says, all right, there's no errors, everything's cool. Where do we really want to go? What has happened? There are 3 buttons on this form. They all are submit buttons. Submit, submit, submit. So they all submit the form. But they mean different things. If it's the cancel button, we probably don't even need to validate. Why would there be errors? We could put that if statement in here. If it's deleting, I don't really need to validate. So the only time I really need to do this validation is if the button, and that's in the request array, if exists, button save. If that button, and there's only one, can't submit 3 different ways, only one. If this exists, then button save will be in the list. And if it does, then go ahead and do all this fun stuff. Else, if, and I might, maybe this is better with a switch. It would have to be a switch true, whichever one of those is really set. Now let's give it a try. Switch true, case is set the button.
And that goes all the way down right before the break.
Thank you. Actually, no, that's a different break. Because there's 2 switches here. There's a switch for the action.
Right, so
This is
then-
my switch for the button. So what I'm
So
missing is a break for this if. Here.
And don't you want to end that switch?
Yes, I will need to do that. Thank you. Let's
On the other
remember to
side,
do
yeah.
that before we forget. Right. So this is the end. Okay, thank you. If they hit cancel, what I want to do, I want to go back and display my list. I don't expect anything else, but just in case. That's the only thing that will display. And here's where I really want to do some work. Now, if I hit cancel, what I really want to do is go back up here and just execute this employee list. Right? Now, I could copy these 1, 2 commands, put them down there. It's not too bad with employee list. Could copy those 2 commands, put them down below. But then if anything ever changes that employee list, I have to make sure I copy it and adjust it in both places. Better idea is to use the header command. Now it's about time to flip to my notes here, which I haven't even brought up yet. Do a quick search in here. And all it says is you might want to do a header call. There's only one? Really? It's annoying. Okay, so let's go back. Where did we do that? Was it MVC where I talked about those things? There it is. Header, location, dot. Okay, so I want to do something similar to that. Header, parentheses, in quotes, single or double, location, colon. I don't want just a dot. I want a dot with an action. Probably get rid of the dot. Let's try it without. What that says is just execute the same index file again, reload it, but with a different action. What this allows me to do is have 3 different buttons, 4 different, 6 different buttons all submit on the form, and my case statement figures out what to do instead of putting a lot of logic into my form saying if they click this button, then do the save. If they click this one, do the insert. If they click this one, do the delete. If they click this one, then each one of these buttons has to be in a, it can't be. It doesn't work. The buttons cannot be in a different form because every one of those buttons refers to this. I need that ID number, except maybe for employee list. I need the ID number. And so I need to have 3, 4 different kinds of buttons potentially on the same form instead of handling some of the buttons here and some of the buttons outside. My current task or my current way of dealing with this is to put a switch statement in here, say figure out which button it was. So if they hit button cancel is just my name for it. It's really, you could name it button list just as easily. If it's the list, then this says, yeah, that's nice. We figured it out. It is the list. Go up and do the employee list case. That's what that really says. Let's see if it works. Start over just in case. And we go in here, check out Tina's record, looks good. Now if I hit save, I still have my save authorized. So it has gone through this process. So it found button to save, it validated my stuff. And right now I think validate employee inputs has very little in it. If the count of errors is 0, it must have been because it authorized my save, and right there it stops. Yeah. That's not what I had in mind. If I hit delete, it has sensed the delete. That's all I'm doing right now. And this is kind of what I'm hoping to have you at sometime this week, is that even if you're not ready to write code to delete records, even if we're not deleting records, at least sense that you've gotten there. And then finally, if I hit the list button, I expect to go back to the list, and I do. What we're still missing here is logic to handle a new record. What if it's new? I want to be able to use this exact, I need something on the form here to say, hey, I need a new employee. So an icon, a link, something to say, hey, I need a new employee. When you click that, it takes you, I want it to go back to this same form with all this stuff wiped out. Still has a save button, still has a cancel button, still take me back to the list without saving button, all that stuff. And I believe I also have plugged in the are you sure? So if I now say go back, oh, that was a submit button. It's time for a break. Why didn't it warn me on the way? Because, and I have to look, I think I might have a solution for this, but why didn't it warn me on the way? Because I hit a submit button, and the are you sure method doesn't work. It ignores submit buttons. So I'm pretty sure somewhere in my notes I have a little piece of code that says pretend like the user's leaving the page and invoke that are you sure method. So I'll dig that up during the break.